Just be completely 100% confident in what you're doing. Don't doubt yourself. Keep making. Don't give up. Don't be deterred. Don't let anybody put you off. And if you really want to do something, do it.
Welcome to the Arts to Hearts podcast, a show for artists, creators, creative entrepreneurs to have heartfelt conversations about living a creative life and a career. As you go into this show, hear your favorite creators talk about money, mindset, business, creativity, and everything else that goes behind into making a life that we all adore as an artist. Hear the messy and the wonderful side of being a creative. I am your host, Jarrett, an artist, creator, and founder of Arts to Hearts project. Thank you for joining me here. Let's jump right in. Hey you guys, welcome back to the Arts to Hearts podcast, season 2, and this is the first episode. I have a very, very lovely guest who I actually have happened to have before, but we have here back again, and I'll tell you the entire story. But let me introduce you to Sarah Jarrett. Welcome back to the podcast, Sarah.
Thank you, Chirika. It's lovely to be back and to be talking to you today.
Same here. And for our listeners who are confused about why we're talking about being back, since you've not heard this episode, let me quickly tell you. So Sarah and I actually recorded an episode for season 2, sometime I think in November, December, right?
Yeah, November,
and
I think.
It's such an irony because I was like, I'm all prepared. I was like, I'll have like everything in place before, we release. And yesterday, just as I happened to prepare things for the launch of this episode, I was like, let me just have a look at the entire edit and the video. And I was like, where is the edit? So I actually lost a big part of that audio and video. And I quickly emailed back to Sarah that this is what has happened. And I requested her if she would want to come back and if we can come back to the schedule according to hers. Thankfully, she said yes, and we are back again. So this episode is actually a part of 2 episodes, of one which you will never hear, which only Sarah and me know.
Because it's a bonus, I get to talk to you again, and it was great talking to you the first time, so it's good for me.
Yeah, it's a great excuse to speak to you again. But it feels like, I'm like, how did I even do this? It feels like this is like first episode of season 1 I would expect myself to do, and this is second season and episode 1, and I'm doing this. But this is life. This is what happens. No podcast is perfect, and so am I. Okay, but the good thing is, Sarah, you and I are so much more comfortable. Because we've had a conversation, I'm so sure that this is going to be even more exciting one. I know you are in a more chirpier mode than the usual one. What do you say?
That I'm more chirpier?
Yes, you look more chirpy today.
So, yeah, I think so. I think I'm not sure why. Maybe the last time I think I was more nervous, like maybe not feeling as prepared for it. This time I think because we've already spoken, and I'm up for it this time. Yeah.
you were even fabulous then, and you look even more fabulous today. So I'm sure this is going to be an exciting one. Okay.
Yeah.
Even like before we get into this episode, like always, would you like to introduce yourself to our audience and people who are listening to this episode?
Okay, I'm Sarah Jarrett. I'm a UK collage artist, and the main interest I have is in nature. And I make digital work and analog work, but most of my images explore the human relationship with nature in some way. I love botanicals, I love metaphors, symbolism, folklore, fairy tales, and I think that kind of summarizes my work.
You've said everything that I love, and I can't even tell you how much I am so obsessed with your work. Even the other day when I was preparing the show notes and I was re-looking at your work, I was like, how do you do that? How? Because, I love the darkness in your work. I just love that. And animals and nature and animal figures and women, like, I just feel like, even though like our interest is so similar, I mean, my work also surrounds very similar topics and subjects, but your work is so different in how we interpret things. uh, my first question is, would you talk a little bit about how did you start a creative career? How did you get into the arts? Did you always think you would like? Did you think yourself like as an artist always?
Not really, no. It was a really an unusual journey, and probably quite a slow journey, because I think as a child, I was interested in really creative things, and we had, a really creative upbringing. But I certainly, if you'd said to me at that point, you're going to end up working as an artist, I would have been really surprised. So
Really?
I don't think I planned it or thought about the fact that I could actually do that until probably post school, when I was choosing, thinking about a career and what I wanted to do. And I suppose my entrance into that world was through choosing to study photography. So
I read that you studied photography.
I was torn between journalism, because I was really interested in writing, or photography, and I had I had a really strong interest in that. But again, I kept thinking I couldn't really visualize what a career in that was going to look like. And I did an absolutely brilliant course at Harrow School of Art, and
Yeah.
really creative photography degree course. So it was very experimental. There was lots of opportunity to sort of explore all sorts of different techniques and different ways of working. It was very arty. There was so much kind of help given from the technicians and other students, and it was a huge kind of learning opportunity. So when I finished there, I then decided that I was going to train to teach art,
Oh,
and
wow.
that was kind of the beginning of the journey, where I was then beginning to make my own work much more and teach alongside. And gradually, as time's gone on, the teaching became less, reduced that down, and to a point where I'd now just work full time as an artist. So it's been a really gradual journey. It's not, it certainly wasn't a vocation I had from childhood where I suddenly thought I'm going to be an artist and that's my path.
Did you have any like creative influences in your family and while growing up that made it possible for you to believe that, like, choosing a creative path? Because I know that I didn't have that. I know that a lot of my guests who've been on the podcast have had similar experiences, that they didn't even believe or knew like that you could actually make a living or a life as an artist. I mean, even now, a lot of people still don't understand what I do. And it's so hard for me to even explain it to them that that's how I make a living.
Yeah, I don't think I consciously had any sort of direct role models. There are a lot of very creative people in our family, but I think the thing that probably gave me the most confidence was that nobody ever said to me, "You can't do that." So that,
I love
there was
this.
and that's great to have that feeling that, to feel some sort of confidence that, okay, well, I
Now
could
I'm going
take on, or I could start this journey and it might not work, but it might. And nobody ever said you can't do that or tried to talk me out of it. So from that point of view, that was great, and I think it gave me a lot of confidence. My uncle was an architect. He was really good at drawing. I think I saw lots of people doing creative things, but I don't think there was directly an artist in the family that was like a role model for me to say, oh, well, I want to do the same as, somebody else that was already there. My mum was really creative with words. She was a writer, so it's her that I think inspired me to read a lot and to always be surrounded by books, picture
Oh,
books,
wow.
storybooks, and that opened the doors really to the idea of using your imagination. And I think we lived a kind of really idyllic childhood where we were kind of just lost in stories and books and going to see ballets or plays, or we were just surrounded by really creative
Oh,
opportunities.
wow.
And I'm really grateful particularly to mum for that, because she really instilled that in us, that there isn't just this world, that in your mind and in your imagination there are all kinds of other worlds that
Oh my
exist.
God. I can, as you're saying this, I can really picture so much of your work. Like, it's really that. It's very captivating. It feels like, like you have created this alternate space where it feels a lot real, because maybe it's because of those humans, the faces, the features, but it's also very like, it's very magical, and it's like, a place where you want to escape.
I'm glad it has that feel, because when you're making that sort of work, there's kind of a thin line between things looking too realistic or looking too imaginary, and I
Yeah,
think trying to get the balance of that right is quite a sort of difficult thing. So I feel reassured that it has that kind of magic feeling,
it
because that
absolutely
is very much
does.
something that I've wanted to create. So yeah. And I think also as I've got older, I think as you get older, you develop more confidence in
Yeah,
just being open to exploring different ideas and accepting if things do or don't work. And in my 20s, I would have been really nervous about that. But
yeah,
in my 50s, I feel like there's a huge amount of confidence and risk taking that in your artwork that comes when you are at an older age,
yeah,
because you're less frightened of
yeah.
making mistakes, and I think that's really freeing and quite
Oh God.
liberating for a lot of artists as well.
Yeah,
And also I don't feel frightened anymore of just trying different things. I just say to myself, well, it doesn't matter if it doesn't work, just try it. And so
I
I
love
just keep
that.
taking on more and more things, that are new. But gosh, I really love that so much. I love that opportunity to create so much.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. That's fantastic. Even while you're saying this, while I was having a relook at your work on your website, I was seeing the transition, and a lot of times, whereas nature has been a constant theme, and like it is a very big part of your own work and your visual vocab. In between, I did see a very different body of work from the ones that you're making, which was the landscape ones.
Yeah.
And it was like I could see, I could see and feel that I was being taking on that journey where you were just exploring yourself, and then suddenly at the end it was like the boom, like the last work that you have. I think they are my favorite, like my favorite, because I just love how minimal, how raw, yet powerful they are. Uh, would you want to talk about? I have three questions.
Mm.
Um, your work has this very dark gothic feel, at least the last few, in the last few months, or let's say last year, because before that it was more figurative, it was very bolder, and now I can see that shift where the edges are blending, it's getting moodier and moodier, like I really, it sets.
Wondering why that's happened. I'm thinking, I wonder what the trigger point was for that.
Why do you think is that? What interests you? And how is, like, why animals? Why birds? I know that you have mentioned it on the website, but I wanted to just touch in and dig deeper, because these are one of my favorite themes, and how and why we associate with animals, and why women, why animals, why this theme that keeps coming back into your work.
Well, there's quite a lot of questions there. I think I'm trying to think why there has been a shift, and I don't think it's a conscious shift. I think it's probably something that's just evolved and happened. But I certainly am a very restless person. I always describe myself as not restless in terms of, I can't sit still, but I'm restless in terms of my creativity. So I don't like to focus and stay on just one thing for a long time. And I feel like in my own work, I'm always searching for something I can never quite find. So I think there's that aspect, and I think a lot of other people feel like that as well, but there's certainly that aspect. And I think because I experiment a lot, sometimes experiments and accidents then become a new twist or a turn in what I'm doing. So the kind of interest in sort of part figures, part animals. So I've done a lot that are using a wolf that's like a part wolf, part woman, and then there's been a lot of birds, and it's just thinking about stories and fairy tales and playing about with that idea and the interaction between them and creating these very stark, quite surreal, dreamlike kind of worlds. I think that's what I was trying to do with those. And to make them, to give them that real feel that they're very, there's a darkness to them. And I think it's more just to do with exploring that theme, really. I still love I think I really love colour, and it always draws me back. I think colour's really, really important. But sometimes I'm really interested in the starkness of, telling a story in a particular way. So it might be kind of on the borders of, something quite gothic or something quite frightening. But I suppose it's all part of this restless kind of exploring creativity and never feeling like I can be static. I always really envy people that do work in one particular way, and they know and understand that, and they feel completely at ease and at peace with that all the time. I really envy that, because I think in some ways that I would like to feel like that, but I don't. I'm always looking for something that I can never quite find. And that's great because it makes me take new things on. But in another way, it's not a very restful approach.
I know.
It means you're constantly looking and searching.
But isn't that what being a creative is? Because I feel like it's walking in like unexplored, unpaved path, and you don't even know where you're going, but just you wake up every day and you're like, this is what I get to do and this is what I want to do. And even though it's going to be dark, you will find your own light.
Yes. And I thought it's interesting what you said about the landscapes, because when I first started, quite seriously working with, manipulating photography, it was landscape that I started with. And I must admit, I've really moved away from that a lot. And I miss that sometimes, because I live in a really beautiful place in the country. So very remote, miles from anywhere. And I can walk out of the place where I live, and I can be in the woods, down by the river, on the marshes, and I'm just surrounded by beautiful countryside. It's very, very flat in Norfolk where I live. So there's a real starkness and a real beauty to it. And I was trying in those landscapes to really capture that really strong emotional kind of feel that certain landscapes have, particularly in the winter. But that was the start of the journey, really, I think, with landscape. It's interesting how we start with one thing and then
it lands up. But tell me something. Your immediate geography, your environment. How is that? I'm interested to know, how is that affecting your work? Do you have these animals or these wolves that you spot around, or these what I'm trying to understand is, are these pieces of your own imagination that you're further creating a world, or these pieces are from your reality, then that you take them and then you cook up another world? Where are they coming from?
I think some people would be terrified if that was my reality.
No, I mean these moody, because I know,
Yeah, no, that's a really interesting question. I mean, completely imaginary. It's all from imagination, really.
Because why I'm asking this question, because I'm sitting here in India, and I love period movies, and of course, we see the picturization of different places. And as you in the previous episode also, you told me that you live in a remote space in UK, and a lot of times we picture outskirts and those moody clouds, and then a lot of that moody that we're all a lot of times shown, and I see that somewhere in your work also. So what I'm interested in, is there this influence that's affecting your work and your mood, or that's something that's coming from somewhere else?
I think it does influence to a certain degree, but I think I'm much more likely to take influences from other sources. So I would always say that the things that influence me the most are stories and reading and books.
Oh, wow.
And also, I listen to a lot of music, and I like all kinds of different types of music. But music influences me, song lyrics, and then people's conversations. I'm a real listener. And as a child, I was a really, really shy and quiet child, and I was always listening. And I think there's something within me that, will often tune in to other people's conversations, and I will just hear somebody talking about something, and one particular line or a set of words will really stick in my mind, and that will then become a picture. So words, I think, for me are incredibly influential. It's often words that make me see a picture in my mind or come out as a picture even when I'm experimenting.
So how is, when you're talking about picture, how is your creative process like? Do you like do you just, when I make collages, I would, more than often I would just, and I don't do digital, but that's something I really am interested. You've really inspired me though to get back into it.
You should just have a go.
Yeah, I will. I'm going to keep that in my mind. But I feel like I what triggers you first? Do you just go find images and then your story comes to you, or you have something in your mind and then you look out for visuals that that help you tell that story, let's say?
Well, I never plan images. So again, I don't keep a sketchbook, so I don't sit and record sketches and like try ideas out in a sketchbook before I make a picture. But often I will have an idea that I carry for a long time in my mind, and I have lots in there, and they will I feel like I'm constantly carrying them around, and then I will sit down and I will think, well, I really want to make that into a picture. So it's more, that's how I work. But I pretty much start off literally by experimenting. So I'll cut particular shapes, or I have a huge kind of library of textures and things that I'm really familiar with and I know the layout of, and then I'll just start piecing and cutting and putting them together in different ways. And the thing I like about collage is what you've just alluded to, that the digital collage versus analog kind of traditional cut and paste collage are really, really different ways of working.
Yeah.
And I do both.
Yeah.
And I find it really difficult to do both at the same time. So what I'll often do is I'll do digital work,
okay,
and then I'll do that for a bit, and then I'll switch back to doing analog pieces. But I find them really difficult to mix together. I don't know what it is. It's somehow my brain works in
I can understand that.
Yeah, where I have to just focus on one, then switch to the other a bit later on. I find it interesting because they're so different. I find
I feel like I can understand, because it feels like you have multiple tabs open in your mind, but while there are multiple thoughts going on, I can only focus on one.
Yeah, same for me, really. Yeah, just I mean, I think the ideas are there, but they'll come to like the forefront of my mind at particular times. And sometimes I'll forget something, and then I'll suddenly be prompted by, listening to something or hearing or I'll think, oh, I've forgotten that. I really wanted to make an image of that idea. So, and even the news and things like that. I made a series of pictures in the first lockdown of that whole idea of being disconnected, because we were at that point, and we don't think we'd ever really faced a situation like that, where people felt so cut off and disconnected from one another. So I made a whole series of pictures of heads inside sort of glass domes or glass bubbles, and really beautiful women's faces or heads completely disconnected from bodies, but surrounded by these like inner worlds inside globes and glass containers and jars that were really beautiful on the inside, but really stark around it. And there was something about listening to people's different stories from that first lockdown that really resonated. And that real sense of people feeling very cut off and really isolated really struck a deep chord, and I really wanted to make some images about that. So sometimes it's something really topical, or just something that's really moved me in a particular way, and then I feel like I have to make an image about it.
I think certain situations we all have that pull. And I feel like a lot of artists make either like out of compulsion to make, or out of compulsion to react. And it's always like, it's not this or that. A lot of times, like they just keep happening. When you say that, when you've also spoken about analog and digital, and you also mentioned this on your website, that you love exploring mediums, and that you have been working with different mediums in collaging. Would you talk about how your process has evolved, and what is your current process? How do you approach making a work? What does that look like?
Well, I think the interesting thing about analog work is that it really appeals to people that hoard and collect things. I think part of the enjoyment of analog collage is collecting the materials. So, whether it's really old books that are literally falling to pieces that someone might have discarded or got rid of, or scraps of something that you see in a newspaper, or just collecting all sorts of like ephemera. And then the storage of that is a complete nightmare, because I have so much stuff that then I just keep hoarding all these other bits of papers and tickets and all kinds of bits and pieces. And that fascinates me, looking at other collage artists, their work methods in their studios, and just having a little glimpse into, some people are incredibly organized and will have drawers and drawers and drawers of, individual letters and colors, and it's like a library, and it's like, oh my goodness. Whereas mine are just kind of shoved in like bits of newspaper.
I'm with you. I'm 100% with you. When you're talking about hoarding, also, what I love about this idea is I'm a big time hoarder. I'm a big time hoarder. And I didn't realize this about myself or my creative practice until I got into collaging. And then I think, it's like one little